What is going on, cyberspace? Welcome to the HyperPixel podcast. I am Michael K. And on this day, there is not one but two Ghostbusters on this podcast. And the other dude that is busting them ghosts, his name is Zarain. What's going on, Zarain?
Not much, dude. I have not strapped on a proton pack in I don't know how long. Mm-hmm. I don't know where my ghost traps are. So,
bro, I understand. It's been, I don't know.
Weird.
It's been a little over a year for me, too. Probably about a year and a half.
Oh, yeah.
I had a haunting in my attic here that I had to take care of.
Right.
But ever since then, I've been kind of chill. It's been pretty chill in the house. No green lights and weird things like that. So
didn't you and the crew, the Michael K crew, go out to some woods and some castles and stuff? And bust
That's
some ghosts
correct.
recently?
We didn't actually bring any packs with us that day.
Yeah.
We were just, to be honest, we were filming a music video in this haunted location. We didn't actually do anything there other than music video stuff. So I apologize to whoever is dealing with that situation there, but bummer.
That's their ghost, their problem.
Mm-hmm. They actually did not call us. We just we just saw that they had ghosts there, and we didn't. We just showed up and did our
took
thing
advantage of the situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope somebody.
Well,
helps them.
hey, it's part of the contract. You got to call.
Exactly.
Who are you going to call?
Yeah.
If you're not going to call Ghostbusters, you ain't going to get to Ghostbusters.
Precisely that.
Oh my goodness.
So what's been going on in Sector X, Zarain?
So I spoiled this for you a little bit earlier. I began the podcast before we hit record apparently. But I recently acquired Final Fantasy VIII Remastered because
I'm in shock. That's insane.
I realize you're getting close to the very end of this game, I'm sure. Yes. And I want to be able to talk with you, about it cogently when you finish. I would like to have a podcast about it.
Yeah,
I think
it would be awesome.
Be cool.
I'd love to do that.
And it's been so long since I played it. Like I was telling you, it's probably been a couple decades. Mm-hmm. And actually more than that. Yeah, more than that, because it came out when I was in high school. And so like I've started playing it again since then, but I've never played it to like completion.
Yeah.
And I've watched like, video games, the movie of it, and I'll probably do that again as I'm playing it just to kind of keep up. Because one of the cool things about the remaster that you were telling me about, and it is really cool, is it's got like a way to speed up the game 3 times. So it makes it a lot faster going through crap you don't want to have to go through and traveling. Mm-hmm. You could turn off random encounters, which I haven't really done yet because I'm trying to, make sure I'm getting levels as I go.
I do that the real way in the game when I just can't deal with it anymore.
Oh yeah. And then there's another setting. I don't know what it's called, but it's like you get unlimited limit breaks. Like every turn you can take a limit break, and it seems like you don't get damaged when that mode's on. So it's really a lot easier. And like one of the things that was funny to me is like early in the game, there is a couple places you can see this. You can see this kind of out in the wild in the woods, and you can see it in the training center at the first garden. Mm-hmm. There's a like the Tyrannosaurus thing. I forgot what it's actually called, but you fight it, and like the point of fighting it is to teach you to run away from battles, like originally. But I didn't because I didn't have to. And so I'm like, and I'm going to beat this dude into the dust. And it took a long time.
Yeah.
And then later she tells you, about junctioning magic to a certain status or I forget which one it is. I think it's like strength J or something like that. And if you use the magic that's junction to that, then it's weak to that. And so then it would be really easy. It's you have to bind sleep to it or something. Mm-hmm. It would be really easy to beat it. I still didn't do that. It's like I fought one twice. And it's like, it takes a long time to beat this thing, even with just like pure limit break after limit break after limit break. If you're like level, 9, 10. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting. That's why I got scared. I'm like, if this is the case, I know some of the later bosses, like that are like very strong to like physical attack, but weak to certain elemental attacks. Yeah. Like, yeah, I could sit there for an hour beating down on it and beat it, but do I really want to do that?
Right.
I don't think so.
Probably
so like,
not.
I need to start paying more attention to the junctioning. And it's one of those systems that like when I first saw it, and we're getting into the Final Fantasy VIII podcast. I won't talk too much about it, but until you realize what all it's actually trying to tell you to do in the tutorial, you're like, I have no idea what's going on.
Right. It's
what is this? Why am I doing this?
It just it's just so funny to me that the game just like it literally lets you play it wrong for like the first half of the game.
Yeah, like, yeah. It doesn't even force you to look at the tutorial.
Right.
Like, yeah. There's a couple points where like you can like kind of first junction, although you could do it before then, where it's like, okay, here's junctioning tutorial, and it's like going through it, and it's like at that point in the game, if you're not the kind of person to go out of the way to try to learn how to play this kind of a game, you're just gonna be like, whatever, I'll figure it out later.
Right.
And no, you won't.
Yep.
No, you won't.
Facts. Dude, yeah, I just got to a point and I just had to stop and do a reboot in the middle of the game. And it was look up some YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah. So I'm very pleased with the remaster so far. I think it's really cool, like how we need to stop talking about this. We need to have a Final Fantasy VIII podcast.
Yes, that's gonna
happen as soon as we both complete this game, and that'll be a good one because I like the only Final Fantasy game that I've played to completion recently, and I've done it several times, is Final Fantasy on the NES, and I really like that one a lot for a lot of different reasons. Not the least of which is the first Final Fantasy game I ever played, but I still think 8's my favorite, and I want to see if that holds up playing through it.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do before we talk about it is I'm going to watch like Final Fantasy VI video games, the movie sort of thing, like the cutscenes and all that, and reread the plot, because I know many people. If you get past the Final Fantasy VII is the best Final Fantasy crowd, and no offense if that's your favorite Final Fantasy game at all whatsoever, they're all valid picks. They're all great games in some way or another. I just think that Final Fantasy VII is so overblown and so overrated because so many people, that was their first Final Fantasy game,
right? Or
it was the first 3D-ish Final Fantasy game, and that was a big deal too. And it is a big deal. Don't get me wrong. I think it's awesome. I do really believe, and this is my honest belief, as much as I love Final Fantasy VIII, I really truly believe that going this like 3D route was the death of Final Fantasy as it lives in my heart. The 2D turn-based thing, that's always going to be Final Fantasy to me, but that's a different story. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I know many people very similar to like how I feel about Mario games. Like 2D Mario is not 3D Mario. Like they are just literally different video games. And
yeah, I agree with you. And that's definitely not to say that 3D Mario is not great.
Yeah.
Because definitely there's lots of great 3D Mario games. Final Fantasy, though, on the other hand, I don't think that there are a lot of great 3D Final Fantasy games. I haven't played 15. I haven't really played 12. You can't really count the MMOs. That's a different thing. Titus, I hate Titus. I'm sorry if you're a Titus fanboy out of 10. He's so annoying to me. And I can see how Squall's annoying to people, but I'll talk more about that when we talk about it. Yeah. Anyway, I think a lot of people think that 6 is the best. If you get past the Final Fantasy 7 is the best route, a lot of people will say 6 is the best, especially because it's a really epic story, really epic. There's a really epic ending to the game, really epic. And that is really, really, really freaking cool. And I understand why people pick that. I just want to go. I want to go and have that experience to some degree without having to, spend hours and hours and hours playing the game.
Yeah, right. Do
the 8 thing, and then so that we can have a coherent discussion about them.
Yeah.
Have you played 6? Because I might have to spoil 6.
No.
Oh crap.
Okay. I'm going to.
Okay.
But yeah, just not there yet. I got to freaking beat 8 first. Finally.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Well. That's all I'm going to say about Final Fantasy VIII, but I'm enjoying my time playing the game.
That's excellent. I'm glad to hear somebody's experiencing Final Fantasy VIII with me right now, so that's cool. Even though that I have taken a breather from it to play a couple other things, and I'm going to come back to it. I forgot what I have next on my list after. So I actually started a different game that one of our mutual friends recommended to me. So it's called Outer Wilds. And it is a space exploration game, and this isn't a spoiler because it literally says it in the description. It is a space exploration game, but mixed with like freaking Groundhog's Day. So it's like a time loop thing where every time you die, the game starts over. So you're like discovering things and like you end up getting killed or whatever. And then, you know, it loops back around and then you obviously you remember everything. So you're trying to figure out what the heck's going on here. And there are a few other people in the world that this is happening to as well. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm looking this up now because that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, that sounded awesome to me, which is why I shoved it in front of everything else that I was going to play next. So
I can understand.
So yeah, playing that now. I think from what I saw on how long.
Oh, this kind of looks like. Sorry to interrupt. It looks a little bit like Subnautica in space.
Yeah, that's what people have said. It feels a lot like Subnautica in space. But like it's wild, bro, when you take off out of the atmosphere and you're just like freaking there and like you can land on planets and stuff like that. It's really,
that's awesome.
It's really it's like seamless. It's not like, you know, a bunch of weird transitions and loading screens and crap like that. So it's pretty cool.
Right. Nice. Yeah, this may be a game I have to put on the list.
Yeah. I think how long to beat had it at like 14 or 16 hours to beat or something like that.
That's not bad.
So it's not too bad. So yeah, and one of those where it's obviously like basically open world, so you can spend as much time as you would like in it.
Nice.
But yeah, so
yeah, that looks quite intriguing.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to getting into that. So
nice.
So Zorain, the topic at hand today. So cyberspace, we were talking about emulation and all the different forms of emulation, software emulation, FPGA emulation, all these other different things that I had this thought this morning in the shower. It's like on a lot of these retro consoles, there are emulation devices that you put in that hardware, like it's like an augmentation, like a cyberpunk augmentation for that hardware. And it's emulating something else inside of it, you know.
That's a cool way to think about it.
Yeah, you just need like cyberpunk-esque shells to put all these systems in with their augmentations and everything.
That's right, and then it needs a voice to talk to you.
Right, exactly, of course. Dude, the speaking of cyberpunk, the cyberpunk Xbox One actually looks really cool. They released. Like,
I haven't seen it.
It's just it looks really cool. It's like yellow and like gray and has all the different like it looks very cyberpunky. So
sure.
Unfortunately,
that's awesome.
It's expensive, but you know.
Yeah, that's funny.
So
man, I have not given that game another chance since the week it came out, and it's going to be really hard for me to.
Yeah, the patch, just to like totally derail this topic, the patch just came out for that.
Did it?
Yeah, the patch.
Yeah.
You know,
when they've been talking about for a year.
The one that should have been the game when it originally came out. That one just came out. So I actually picked it up. The PS4 copy, they were giving it away because, you know, it was basically unplayable. It was just like totally broken. For $10, like it like came with all these different extras and whatever. It was $10, but it has a free upgrade for the PS5 version whenever that releases, which just came out. So
nice.
There's that. So I'll play that at some point whenever I get around to that after Final Fantasy VIII, because I'm not doing that to myself.
Yeah, I bought it on Good Old Games. Obviously the same company. Because I really appreciate their stance on DRM. I think that's the right way to go about things. And I want to support that, and I wanted to support them too because I like cyberpunk themes. I think they've made great games in the past. I don't know what happened here. Like it's just they released it before it was ready. I mean, that's all it was to it. And they kept saying that they wouldn't do that, but that's what they did. And that makes me extremely skeptical of them going forward, unfortunately.
Yeah, that whole thing. So.
I mean, Good Old Games is a great service, though. I really like it. I have a lot of games on there. I probably will still buy games in the future. That's not going to stop me from buying those things because those things always seem to be packaged really well. And they have like community maintainers for a lot of that stuff, I think, right? Where it's not just them maintaining the, DOSBox image or whatever for it. It's whoever, really loves the game.
Yeah,
It's like, keeping it up to date and whatnot.
So,
anyway. Okay, emulation.
So when did you first get into emulation, Zoran? Because I know for me, it was I think I was a freshman in high school, maybe either that or late middle school, something like that. And I got a Super Nintendo emulator. It was the whole Chrono Trigger debacle when I overwrote my save state and ruined my life. But
it's sad.
Yeah, I did that, and I just started downloading a bunch of games that I never had that I always wanted to play, or like games that I rented that I never owned, stuff like that. And it was just like, holy crap, this is phenomenal! I can't believe I can just play whatever I want right now. This is crazy.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I recall exactly. I know it was when I was in college. It was not when I was in high school. I'm fairly certain. Although it would have been early in college, so that would have been like, 2103 or something, 2102, one of those years. And for me, it was an NES emulator. And I don't even remember what all I had downloaded for it. I just know that it's one of those things where emulation, it hit me early on with emulators, and it's really kind of been the story of my relationship with emulators, is that as cool as it is to be able to play everything, it is like it's like a device that dispels magic. That's the way I look at them.
Right.
Because there's a lot of magic and of course there's this nostalgia and emotionality around having a console, physical console, having a physical cartridge or copy of a game. CDs kind of do this to it, or disc-based systems do this to a small degree too. Remove the. It's like mystical, right? Because you don't know what's in this little gray cartridge, and all I know is I put it in this other box and I flip this switch, and then I can play a fun game.
Right.
And so there's a lot of magic around that, and there's a lot of physical and mental interplay that creates an experience that gets just kind of evaporated when it comes to emulators. And so that hit me early on. So I never really got super deep into emulation. Although I still, I'm not against emulators, not against people using them. Some people have like a kind of a moralistic, or they think legalistic stance against those things. I think those sorts of stances, specifically the legal stances, are really hard to defend, if you ask me. Again, I've mentioned before, I'm sure on this podcast, if not, I will mention it now and surely many times in the future. I'm no fan of intellectual property. As an artist, I understand why people want the idea of intellectual property, but I don't think that it's really a concept that ports well to the reality we find ourselves in now. You're fighting all the time to make sure that IP stays to be a thing, when the P part of the IP property really requires some actual literal scarcity. We could talk about an economics lesson then another time, but that's my perspective. So it's like, it's one of those things where I think that there's nothing wrong with emulation, and I love that it exists. I'm very happy that it exists because it enables new, unique things. This is why I'm such a person against intellectual property, is because intellectual property blocks new, unique things from happening. A lot of new, unique things from happening. Think about remix culture, all of that stuff. If it weren't for IP, then remix culture would be even way more off the chain than it is right now. Like way, way, way more off the chain. And we would have such wonderful creative things, an audio, visual, movies, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people do it anyway now. But if people could do it so regularly as to be able to make that an engine to support themselves, whether through like Patreon or something like that, legally, and not get C&D'd out of existence, we would see a lot more, I think, interesting things. But
just to interject there, the developer that did the AVGN games, and he's done a few other things, but he started as a Sonic fan game developer. Like there was
Exactly.
a gigantic Sonic fan game. It was like what was it? Sonic Fan Games HQ, and
Oh,
I
wow.
frequented this site as well. But you know, a bunch of people just like sprite artists. They would make sprite sheets for all the different Sonic characters and levels and whatever, and
Wow. That's awesome.
and they would build engines in this. It was called Multimedia Fusion. The software. It was like a WYSIWYG, if you will, but it was, you could do very complicated logic in it, even though you're just like clicking around and saying if this then that and whatever. Like you could legitimately build some serious logic in the thing.
I mean, didn't you say that's what Five Nights at Freddy's was made in?
I think it was. Actually, now that you
Like
say
the
that,
original one,
I've
at
forgotten
least?
about that. Yeah, but dude still uses the newer version of that software for like the
Wow.
stuff that he does. And
Oh, wow.
they actually have like compile this for Xbox or compile this for PC or you know whatever. So that's really
Really?
cool. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, like developers like him, you know, and I want to say the guy that is Christian Whitehead, he was like the lead developer for Sonic Mania, that he started doing that in the Sonic fan game, you know, community as well. So
Wow.
you know, that's just like, it comes full circle, man. Like a Sonic
Yeah.
fan game developer literally ends up making an official Sonic game at some point because it's so good. So
Yeah. And one of the other things that I am to some degree, not much, but to some degree involved in when it comes to what emulation allows when it comes to these creative aspects is randomizers, right? I like the Final Fantasy NES randomizer. It's really cool. It's not just a randomizer. That's what I really like about these things is these are basically like ways to patch ROMs to make the game behave in a different way. And if we didn't have ROMs, you know, people, you know, taking the image of a game into a file on a computer and then decompiling it so that they could see how it works, we wouldn't have the ability to, you know, patch this code to make it do all these different things. Like all of the things that the Final Fantasy randomizer can do is absolutely nuts. I don't even know how it's possible. It's like brilliant people working on this because it does stuff like, I mean, of course, it does simple like Game Genie-esque stuff. Like you can have infinite money, or you know, never take damage, or greatly reduce damage, stuff like that. That's not really too surprising because game, like I said, Game Genie did that kind of stuff, or could do that kind of stuff. If not for that game, at least for some games, so you can imagine how it could be done. But that's another good question. It's like, how did Game Genie do it? You know, that's a different conversation for a different time. But it does really creative stuff like, you know, only have 3 party members, require it only to have 3 party members instead of 4. If you want to like challenge yourself, or only start with 1 party member and then you can go and you can recruit other party members from certain ends around the world. About like, I think you have to pay money or something. I'm not hardcore enough to actually play the game like that, but it's cool, neat concept that actually makes it play more like a D&D campaign. And is more realistic than you just all start together.
Right.
Well. And then there's all kinds of stuff that's like, you know, obviously rearranging what like magic attacks that enemies have, you know, making enemies like just super easy, like making it where you get like 10 times the XP for battles, you know, speeding up the game, all kinds of stuff, turning off like random battles, like it's just so much that you can change about the game. Like, and they have a website that you go to the website and it's like pages and pages of options that you can just check on, check off, set sliders, set values, all that kind of stuff. And then what you do is you upload your ROM image of the regular game, you put in all your options, and then it makes it the changes on the fly. And then you download the new ROM image that you play in the emulator. It is awesome. And the super awesome thing about that is, since it is just an image, you can play that on hardware. So you can get something like, and we can talk about what these are, but like an Everdrive, put that on the Everdrive and play it on a hardware NES, this modified randomized whatever version of Final Fantasy, or any randomizer. There's lots of them. You know, there's Zelda one, there's a Metroid one. I'm not. Those are the ones I'm aware of, but I know that there's got to be others. There's probably a Mario one. It's crazy, dude. It's crazy.
Yeah, I haven't really messed with those enough. I really need to do a little bit of research and find. I need to find a Sonic one. I think that would be awesome.
There may be.
But yeah, that man. I was just thinking about how cool that would be. Yeah, like I think like Sonic games, it's interesting like how well like I know them. So like out of all the games that I play, I probably know like Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Knuckles, like those couple of games the best. So like playing some kind of randomizer on those, that would probably break my brain, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because like even like playing the Sonic Jam ports of Sonic 3, I was very, very much in tune with, oh, like this freaking like block is not there in this version.
Oh, yeah.
It's there in the regular one. So yeah, I'll have to look that up. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, man. And so that's just like a really creative thing that emulation opens up. Yeah. And I really think that we've only seen the beginning of that. Obviously, that kind of stuff can be done with like patches on PC games. That's pretty simple and straightforward. Because I mean, basically, you're just changing the code that executes, and that's what you're doing too with the ROMs. But it's like, it's the whole barrier aspect of it. It's like you could never do that with a physical cart, right? And so, like, because the physical cart was what it was.
Yeah,
no changing it. And the fact that you can start to do that sort of thing, again, it removes the magical element of the hardware and all that, but it opens up this whole new realm of just like things to explore. Like you can re-explore all your old favorite games, like we're talking about, in just brand new ways that really, you know, back in the day, I don't know if they still do this because I don't really look at game reviews anymore. I haven't in a long time, actually. But like back in when we look at reviews in magazines, like, you know, EGM and Game Pro and Game Player and Tips and Tricks and all those magazines that they used to have, Nintendo Power. Most of them, when they reviewed, they always had a like broken down by multiple categories. You know, like, you know, I don't remember all of them, but I know one of them was always replayability.
Yeah,
because you wanted to know if I beat this game like in 5 hours or something, would I still be able, like, is it done? Like, can I ever go back to it? And so that was like one of the levels that they were related on. And this like just explodes replayability for games. Like, basically makes it a 10 out of 10 for all of these games. Like you can play it as long as you want to.
That's so true.
And that's just something that's amazing that emulation unlocks, that I think, honestly, if that were all that emulation allowed us to do, it would be worth having all of this and fighting all the battles that we've had to you know, have it exist. I mean, it's really like Streisand effect. You're not going to stop it now. It's the cat's out the bag. All you're going to do is maybe try to C&D places that, you know, are hosting ROMs or whatnot. You definitely can't do that with emulators because, like, I mean, it's like, what can you do? There's basically no proprietary aspect. You can't copyright or trademark or anything like computer algorithms specifically. So it's like, I mean, that's literally all an emulator is, basically. So
man, emulators have come a long way since I first started getting into, like, the ones that I originally used, they were DOS based. And like now you have like freaking standalone emulation devices and all these kinds of things. Like, it's what a time to be alive.
I know, right?
Like all these freaking options for playing the same game. But like, have you messed with like a RetroPie at all, or like RetroArch or anything like that? So
I did like art, like RetroArch on computer like once, but it was like I got confused because I'm an old man and I was like, forget it. I'll just download the individual emulators.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. It's actually very well designed. Like especially if you just have like a device hooked up to a TV and you have a controller, and you're just you know, trying to stay disconnected from a PC or something like that.
Right.
It's actually very well designed how you just kind of pick whatever core you want to download, and it's there, and then you load it up with ROMs, and then you're doing your thing. And there's even like versions of that run on Xbox One. Like it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You have to do like you have to enable like developer mode on the console.
Yeah.
And download it not officially through the Microsoft Store, honestly, or obviously, but yeah. So like even freaking on your Xbox One, you can run RetroArch and play all these retro games and stuff.
Is there even a good controller to do that with?
I haven't messed with it, so I don't really know exactly what controller. I mean, you can plug like USB stuff into it, so I'm not sure how those controllers would act on, or how they would behave. So I don't know. I guess it just kind of depends on what the controller, how it's functioning. Like if it's if it's like emulating an Xbox controller or not. I don't know.
Interesting.
So yeah. What else? So then there's like the whole FPGA aspect of emulation that has just become a wild thing over the past few years. It's like become a major buzzword, and everybody wants to do this now and all this stuff. But specifically, there are a couple. So I have a few FPGA devices. So the Mister project is like the big one. And so basically what the Mister project is it is it's like an open source community driven project that is centered around, I have it right here. I forgot. This is my Mister.
Nice.
But it is this board here in the middle of this stack is called a DE10 Nano. And it is a development board that its primary function was for college students that are getting into that kind of stuff. And that was literally all it was. And people have purchased this board, and they have started developing all these different cores for the board. I'm going to say emulating just because, for ease of conversation here, but emulating these different consoles and everything. So the best way that I have heard FPGA or emulation described is that it's kind of like, imagine if you have a model where you can build a car, and you have a Lego set over here where you can build that exact same car. So with that model kit, you can build that car, and literally like that's all you can build. Like that's the only thing you can build with that model set. But with this Lego set, just for a moment, imagine that you can build the literal exact same car. You can build that car. Or you can take it apart and you can build a helicopter. You can take it apart. You can build an airplane. You can, reconfigure it to be all these different things. And so that's kind of what these FPGA chips are for, is so that a developer can program this chip to be another piece of hardware. And like really expensive FPGA chips, developers can actually use that to simulate what a PCB will be before they create the actual PCB. So yeah. But in doing all that, that gives you the ability to literally be that device. Like, that's arguable.
It makes sense to talk about why they would do that. Because one, you don't want to have to go and print a bunch of boards to test just to see that this isn't right?
Yeah,
you need something that you can iterate on quickly. But not only that, well, then the second question is, well, then why isn't everything just an FPGA board? Well, because relative to a specifically printed board, it's more expensive.
Right.
Because you can print, once you have the design of what components need to be on a board was what you determine, as far as I understand it, with an FPGA. Then you could take that design and say, okay, well, how can I make this the most efficient design by making the board as small as possible or as cheap to print as possible, whether that be size-wise or component-wise, et cetera.
Yeah. So yeah. But that they run like a programming language. I think the one that I hear talked about the most is hardware description language. I think that's what it's called. HDL.
Yeah.
But anyway, so these developers in the Mister community are implementing, they call them cores of these different arcade boards and all these retro consoles, and they have on several of them they've gone as far as to like decapping the chips on these boards, and literally like this FPGA chip becomes that board. Like they have totally rebuilt the logic of that PCB in HDL or whatever, and they're, you know, when you load up that core, like this freaking thing has become that piece of hardware basically. So the only problem with this is, well, it's gotten a little expensive. It's when I first got my board, it was about $120, and I think they are selling for almost $200 now, just
Oh man.
because hardware being what it is, you know, in current times and all that stuff.
True.
But to get into the Mister, I mean, really all you need is the DE10 Nano and the RAM expansion and some kind of USB hub, and that's really all you need. Like this board on the top is actually an analog output board, so you can output an analog audio video signal to like a CRT or PVM or, you know, whatever, something like that. And then I have a USB hub that's kind of like, you know, sandwiched into it to make it a little bit cleaner here, but that's totally unnecessary. But anyway, so the big thing now is like people, this makes me cringe so hard. The people who they cannot get their minds around the fact that somebody else wants to enjoy a video game on a different piece of hardware than the piece of hardware that they want to use.
Yeah.
And this is everywhere. This is Mister versus Raspberry Pi. This is Xbox versus PlayStation. This is console versus PC Master Race. This is literally everything. It drives me up the wall. I cannot handle it. Like I just don't get it.
Well, people have some sort of innate sense of the purity of an activity, I guess is the only way to describe it. Like that means anything, right? Because they tell themselves these stories about what they're doing, and for them it means this thing, and it means this thing in this context of this story that they've told themselves.
Yeah.
And then when they see somebody else that's not acting in accordance with it, that says, hey, your story's wrong. Hey, your story's wrong. And so instead of taking that information and modifying their story, what they do is they flip it out and say, you're wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. You're not acting in accordance with my story. And this is even beyond video games, right? This is everything in life.
Yep.
And they think, many people seem to think that if they can't get everybody else on board with their story, then something's wrong in the world and they got to fix it. And it's the cause of so much literal human suffering, but also mental strife, especially in this like realm, because it's like, what does it matter?
Dude.
Because somebody needs to get on a forum and needs something to post about, and they want to vent. And it's like, okay, that's fine, vent, but you're just making things worse for yourself. You're not making things better for other people.
Right. Oh man, just freaking enjoy your video games, guys. Good grief.
I don't know. Some people, I don't know if they can enjoy anything in life. I think they just have to be.
That is actual facts. But yeah. So speaking of Raspberry Pi, so that's another, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but Raspberry Pis have gotten pretty powerful for what they are, and like it's literally gotten to a point where you can download a what you call it, RetroArch like image, and just install it on the thing, and it comes with like everything. So literally all you do is you install that image on your Raspberry Pi, and it's ready to go.
That's awesome.
It's good to go. So I think from a I think emulation has gotten like so good over the past decade or so. Like unless you are very in tune with the way a game plays, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, you're probably not going to notice the difference between a lot of these different devices that you play it on.
Yeah.
So there's
Like,
that.
I mean, that's the thing is like when I was like seriously running Resident Evil 2, I had started running it on GameCube, so like the Biohazard Japanese version on GameCube, and this is one of the reasons I want to buy a Japanese GameCube because I want to do it on the hardware. But never once, and I mean, speedrunning is very sensitive to how a game performs.
Yeah.
Never once did I ever notice because I was using Dolphin. And never once did I notice any hiccups, any problems. And I mean, I ran it at least 20 times on GameCube.
Yeah.
With a ROM on a PC, and it's like, I mean, if you're paying that close attention to how a game's performing when you're doing speed running and you've done it that much, it's probably not going to be a problem. That game at least. Maybe there's other games, okay, sure, whatever. And then there's the controller aspect. Yeah, if I want to play Mario 64, like what am I going to do? I have to figure out the controller aspect. But I mean, that's really solved for too, because I mean, there's lots of different ways to do that. So I don't. To me, you're running the same risk. This could be me talking out of a dark orifice or something, but you're running the same risk of encountering a bug or problem with your experience now on an emulator as you are on something like a Mister, because I mean those cores have problems, and some games use the hardware in weird ways that maybe it's not adapted for yet. It's not. The core isn't ready to handle
that right there. I mean, that is the thing with the Mister is like not every single core is 100% accurate right now. I mean, some of them are, but not all of them are, and you're gonna wind up with problems just like you would with a software emulator and that kind of thing. So,
and people have been doing the software emulation longer, so you have more problems solved there potentially than you do with the FPGA stuff. I don't really have a strong opinion on one way or the other, which one I would prefer. Now that you mentioned that a RetroArch image for a Raspberry Pi, I'm interested in looking at Raspberry Pis.
Just be prepared to download a 500 gigabyte image. So
is it really?
Yeah. Well, they have different sizes of it. Like I think the biggest one that you can get is like 5 something ish gigabytes, but they have like 256 ones and so on. So
wait. 500 gigabytes.
Yes.
What all is in that?
Literally everything.
Like every game ever made?
Yeah, bro. Like that's the thing with this kind of stuff is you wind up, and I don't know. I haven't actually used one, so I don't know what all games are in it. But like if you download a ROM pack, somebody says I have every ROM ever made in this package, and you download it, you're gonna wind up with like 20 or 30 doubles of Super Mario Brothers and like all this other garbage you don't want.
Exactly.
So like for that being said, the stuff that I have on my Mister is stuff that has been curated by somebody and well organized, and it is just like one unique image of a game. Versus a bunch of different releases of the same thing.
Canonical image, so to speak. Yeah.
So I trust their curation process. So,
man, well, we need to talk offline about some of that, because I want to figure out a situation sooner or later for not have to sit in front of a computer way to do all that.
Yeah, and it's the Mister has come so far since I first started messing with it. Like, when was it? Was it 2020? Yeah. I built mine like in spring of 2020. And it's just, it has like, there's like even like Capcom, like CPS2 arcade stuff now. There's a PlayStation 1 core that is like rapidly nearing completion. Like it was kind of like in development hell for a while. And then the person leading it ended up leaving for some reason, like dropping it and handed it off to somebody else. And this new, I'm not sure if it's one guy or like a few people, a couple of these developers, like they actually have a team that they kind of work with. They literally like they have a Patreon, and like that's their full-time gig is making freaking Mister stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they have a team that they, do their thing with, but you can like literally look this stuff up on GitHub and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But,
nice.
my brain just stopped working there for a second. I forgot where I was going. Anyway, so like this PS1 core has just accelerated like crazy over the past few months. Like it seems like
Awesome.
It seems like nothing was really happening with it for a while, or nothing. It was going very slowly for a while, and then all of a sudden, it just exploded. And like there are constantly arcade cores coming out like literally every single week. So it's insane. It's totally insane.
No, that's awesome, dude. Like I didn't know it was that rapid. Now that's pretty awesome.
It wasn't when I first started getting into it, but it has been lately. I think since some of these developers have kind of started doing it full time, and they're actually able to build a team of people and to help them out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you have people that, like are arcade connoisseurs that are like really into this, and they're like, I will literally ship you all of my boards right now if you build cores for them.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
yeah, they kind of temporarily donate their hardware to the cause and that kind of thing. So
yeah. Man, that's super sweet.
So yeah. Speaking of the FPGA thing, I just want to briefly mention this. So there is Analog is a company that they make more nicer looking pieces of hardware using FPGA technology. So they have a developer. I don't think he did their newest console, but their previous consoles. A developer, his hacker alias is Kevtris, and he's a freaking brilliant dude. But he built cores for the NES, the Genesis, and the Super Nintendo. And so I have the Genesis one here. So this is a Mega SG. But this is the cool thing about these is they are they output HDMI, and they are actually a console that you can physically put your cartridges in. So you can instead of going the route of having totally original hardware with RGB and all these upscalers and switchers and all this stuff, you can, if you're just interested in like one console like this, then, you can just get this and you can play your, all your Genesis games or whatever, on an HD TV and get pretty good accuracy. And they have, the main reason I wanted this is because it has an attachment where you can play Game Gear games on it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so this actually can do that, and Master System, and what's the other one? SG-1000. Those old ancient games.
Oh man. Now I've got a question about that, because you've piqued my interest.
Yes.
Because there's only two consoles that I'm really concerned about, and I don't know if I want to go down the long, painful path of procuring them and upgrading them to RGB or getting them to RGB. What does that do as far as like upscaling? How does that work inside of that thing?
So it's pretty similar to, I really need to do some research on this so I freaking know exactly what I'm talking about and not just throwing a bunch of words out there. But it does very similar stuff to like what the RetroTink or the OSSC or something like that does, where it's scaling it. It's multiplying, all the lines of the image, and it's scaling it so that. And so if everything, the problem that you run into with emulators is when it's scaling everything unevenly. Yeah. And then you wind up with this weird, like when you're moving, you wind up with this weird shimmering effect that happens, and it really only happens when things are scaled unevenly. And actually, you can see this a lot in like different official releases of games where they have, it's like something running on the Switch that's very clearly running on an emulator, and they have what they try to do is they try to fill up the entire screen with the game. And you wind up scaling it unevenly when you do that. So that being said, like the RetroTink, when it scales up to, you can do like a 5x scale overscan of it. So it actually it is a gorgeous image, but it's a little bit bigger than the screen, so you have to kind of position it a little bit where you want it. But it's a freaking gorgeous picture. But anyway, the the analog products and the Mister, all these different devices that do that kind of line multiplication scaling, like they do that same thing where it's like, 4x or whatever.
Can you like turn on scan lines and stuff like that on it?
Yeah.
Nice. What is that called now? I need to make a note.
So this one is the analog Mega SG. The Super Nintendo one is the Super NT. And
okay, so the website's analog.co, so ANALOGUE.co.
Correct. So their newest one that they've just released / it's like one of those pre-order wave things because I just hardware being what it is right now, buying hardware and everything. So the Analog Pocket is their latest thing. So it's like obviously a handheld FPGA device, but it's touted as kind of like a Game Boy Advance. There's like an Atari Lynx adapter. There's a Game Gear adapter. And it actually has 2 FPGA chips in it. It has one that has their stuff on it that runs all those different cores, and another one that's a developmental chip. So you can, if you are an FPGA developer, you can load stuff on that chip and do whatever with it.
Bro.
And that one has a dock too, so you can hook it up to a TV. So
bro,
there's that.
What is this Duo? Is this a freaking Neo Geo?
The Duo is a Turbo Duo.
TurboGrafx. Yeah.
That one is not out yet, and the NES one it's ridiculous. I don't know why the NES one is so expensive, but it's expensive, and it's very hard to get. They don't just have them.
Why not?
I don't know.
That's what I want.
Yeah, right. They need to redo the NES. I think probably, I don't know. It has like all these different options for outputs. It has like analog output options and stuff like that. So
yeah,
probably has something to do with the hardware they chose for it initially. They need to remake that one in the form factor of the Super Nintendo and Genesis ones, so they are much more affordable and easy to get.
Yeah. Wait, this thing plays Famicom as well?
Yes.
And Famicom disc? I had pictures of Famicom disc. Tell me that this plays Famicom disc.
I would assume you'd have to load up a ROM with like an Everdrive or something.
It says requires FDS unit, whatever that is.
Oh, the disc, the actual hardware.
Oh,
or maybe
okay.
Oh no, you can actually use that hardware on there. So if you have a Famicom disk system, then you can plug it in there and use it. That's what it is.
Oh.
I've always been curious about one of those, but never pulled the trigger.
Is somebody making like a device that emulates that? Like the we haven't talked about the Everdrive, but does somebody make something that's like an Everdrive that's an FDS?
You can,
like, you just put a SD card in it. I'm
pretty sure you can use those ROMs on that Everdrive and just play the games on NES hardware.
Oh, okay. So you don't need an FDS.
Right. The Mr. Core can run the disk system games. The NES one can. So I don't know. I think the Everdrive can do that. Don't quote me on that, but
one of them probably can.
Yeah.
So we've said Everdrive a lot of times. We haven't talked about what it actually is. You want to talk about what it actually is?
Yeah. So I have one for my actually I have two. I have one for my N64 and I have one for my Jaguar, which it's not actually an Everdrive, but it's the same thing. It's made by somebody else.
Yeah.
So what it is it's a cartridge that has an SD card reader in it. So you put an SD card in it, and first of all, you put ROMs on the SD card, and then you put the SD card into the cartridge. You put the cartridge in your console, and then when you boot up your console, it presents you a menu and lets you pick whatever ROM you want to load. You load the ROM, and then the game boots, and it's like you're playing that cartridge on original hardware. So that is what it is, and there are all different walks of life of these things. So the N64 one that I have is pretty basic. I think it was $90, which is on the lower end of the pricing for those things. It doesn't have
High
save
end
states.
is like double that.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have save states or any of the fancy stuff. It's just literally like you put the ROMs on there, you load one, and then to write the save data from that game back to the Everdrive, you have to hit reset and before you turn it off, and that's it. So just keep that in mind. But there are all different variations of these things. So there are higher end ones, like for example the Super Nintendo one, where you can load up custom soundtracks that people have arranged for these games. You can load those up there on this freaking thing, and it'll play those soundtracks like in the context of the game while you're playing the game. So that kind of stuff is wild.
That's just awesome.
The Atari Jaguar one that I have. So the reason I got this is because Jaguar games are stupid expensive. It's just ridiculous. I do not know.
Because there's none of them. They printed like 4 of each game. Yeah,
exactly. So instead of buying a hand and like the good games, specifically the good games, are just dumb. They're just dumb expensive. It's just so silly. So I got this game drive for this thing. I think that one was like, that was $175. I think that was a pricier one.
Ooh.
But that is like literally cheaper than many of the games on this thing. So it's like, if I'm going to play more than the 3 games that I have over here, it just made sense. So I
Sure.
did that. But that also has an FPGA implementation of the Jaguar CD on it. So you can run Jaguar CD games on this thing without that stupid piece of hardware that apparently fails all over the place. And,
I totally forgot that was a thing.
yeah, I frequently do, and then I have flashbacks to the AVGN episode where he uses it as a toilet.
Appropriately.
Right. But there's that. There's the Genesis one. So there's a Genesis Everdrive, and there's also another company, Terra Onion. They make one. It's called the Mega SD. So side note, I always get the Mega SG and the Mega SD confused. I have to take a breather and think about what I'm talking about. So both of those are, SD card readers for the Genesis, but they also have an FPGA implementation of Sega CD, so you can run Sega CD games on your Genesis without needing Sega CD hardware and all that.
That's pretty sweet. So
Yeah.
you could get one of those, and then one a Mega SD and a Mega SG.
Yes,
and
correct. A
play
lot of people
Sega
do
CD
that. Yeah.
on.
A lot of people do that. So this thing does have an SD card.
What about
reader on it.
32X though?
So it's really strange the way that works, just because of the way that thing interfaces with the hardware.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do? There's like an adapter that somebody makes where you have to plug the 32X in the top, and then you plug the Everdrive or the Mega SD into where the Sega CD expansion port is.
Okay.
And you play it that way. And it looks really strange, but that's how that works. But that being said, no, there's not a 32X implementation on that at all, because I don't know, everybody who's been involved with that just thinks it's not worth it. There is on the Mister, by the way, but that's besides the point. But anyway, these do read SD cards too, so you can actually it is very common, very easy to jailbreak the firmware and put SD cards on this and plop it in there, and you're doing your thing. So
Wait. Rewind a little bit.
yes.
What firmware do you have to jailbreak?
The official firmware for this, I don't know if they just make it easy for developers to jailbreak it, or if they're just like, we don't want to officially do it, but if you want to do it, go for it, that kind of situation. But every time they release an update for this, there's a jailbreak for it, like within a day or something like that.
Yeah.
So all you do is you put the firmware on here, you put it in, it boots, it installs it, and then you can run ROMs off this card.
So I still don't understand why they don't support that out of the box.
I don't, the whole ROM thing, trying to distance themselves from that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know, their
They
position
certainly wouldn't want to advertise it.
Right,
No
right.
doubt.
Their position is, they want to. It's very much a physical cartridge kind of situation here. So,
right.
so that being said, like if you don't really care about like physical cartridges and stuff like that, then I don't necessarily know if one of these is really that worth it, honestly. Versus a Mister, I don't know. It just, again, Larry David GIF.
Well, it's I guess pricing is what comes into play then, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what those things cost. So,
last I checked, they were about 200.
like, I mean, but for a Mister, I mean, you're gonna pay if the board's 200, closer to what 350 to really get up and running.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So bro, there's just like all these different variables here. It's like, do you just want to play one system or do you want to play multiple systems? Do you care about this but don't care about that? Do you want to use physical cartridges or do you not want to use physical cartridges? Are you totally and completely psycho like me and you want to use all this original hardware and all this stuff? And like I didn't even mention this, but just to kind of put this whole emulation thing into perspective, like if you want to use like original hardware to play this stuff. So let's just say the NES, for example. So you want to get an NES and you want to play your NES on your flat screen television in ultra high definition. So you're going to get, maybe like $50-$60 you can get an NES, or let's just say you want a top loader. You just want to go all out and get a top loader. So maybe if you get a good deal on it, maybe about $100. Let's just say $100 for a top loader. So you get a top loader. You got to get it modded for RGB if you want to do that. So that board I think is about $150, and you're gonna have to pay somebody. You're probably not going to install it, so you're probably going to have to pay somebody to install it. So that's probably going to be maybe another $100 or so.
Yeah.
So
you're already 350 in.
350. You definitely need to get it recapped. So this is another thing with like all this old hardware. You want to make sure, like if you're driving an old car, you want to make sure you do a good job maintaining it so that it continues to last as long as possible. So you want to do the same thing with the old video game hardware. So what, if somebody's already in there working on it, they'll probably do it for a little cheaper. So I don't know. Let's just say like 50 or something like that. So that's $400 and all you have is a console, at that point. And then you need to get an RGB cable for it, and you want to get a good one. It's not some cheapo thing that's going to fry your equipment. So you're probably going to spend about $30 on that. You want to get an upscaler. So you're looking at, depending on what kind of upscaler you want to get, let's just say you're going to go all out and get a RetroTink 5X. That's $300. Am I forgetting anything? You if it didn't come with a controller, you need a controller.
Yeah, well, if it came with a dog bone, you definitely get a new controller.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, if you want to play any ROM or any game imaginable on this, you want an Everdrive, so you're going to spend another $175 on an Everdrive.
We're at $930 minus the controller, so if it's a $20 controller, $950.
So yeah, versus versus.
But that's what the best Everdrive, at least. That's the
right. There are other options,
Pro or whatever.
Don't do all the fancy stuff. And obviously, this is like going all out. You just like you want the best of the best. That's kind of what you're looking at. Versus picking up one of these, some other emulation device or FPGA device or whatever. So, yeah.
Well, maybe you've reconvinced me on the Mister again.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's this whole thing again where, like, if you're already part of the way there in one way, and it's like, oh, I already have this and I already have that, and
I mean, the only thing I have is I have a good NES controller, and I have the RetroTink 5X, which is sitting on the floor beside me.
Yeah. So.
Which I got that just for the PS2, PS3 sort of deal.
Yeah, which looks fantastic on that thing, by the way.
And the only feature that I even really cared about, I mean, I cared about the way it looks, don't get me wrong, but the ability to get it into HDMI looking good, even if it were decent, that would have been fine. The only feature of the RetroTink 5X that I care about, and the reason it's worth $300 to me, is the lack of signal drop when changing resolutions, or the minimal signal drop, I guess, when changing resolutions on like survival horror games going into the menu and coming out. That's literally the only feature.
Yes. That is a game changer. Having died many times playing games on the OSSC, and I'm specifically thinking of Dino Crisis, I got very good at pausing when immediately leaving the menu and waiting for the sync to come back and then unpausing.
Oh, man. That's annoying.
Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, I got used to it, but you know, it's obviously that's not a desirable way to play the game.
No, not at all.
But yeah, that works fantastic. But I mean, you know, if you don't, for the NES, I mean, the OSSC is fine. I think it looks really good. I think the RetroTink looks better, TBH. So
yeah, opinions may vary.
Right.
Nice. Man, I could talk about this stuff forever because I'm very interested in, if it hasn't been made clear, I'm in a position where I'm going to do something at some point, but I don't know what I'm going to do. Every time I feel like I'm going to take a step, I'm like, I could just play Emulator on the PC. It's like, I don't really have a good, like, you know, TV couch setup right now. If I did, it would be a different story. I'm going to have one. I just don't have one right now. And so it's
it really boils down to like, what do you want to do? Like, like that notebook GIF. What do you want? What do you want? Yeah. Like we'd have to make like a checklist of all the different things. Like, do you want to use cartridges or do you not want to use like physical media, or do you just want to use ROMs? Do you want to do like have more than one device? Do you want to have it all in one device? Do you care about software emulation versus the FPGA emulation? Like what?
No is the answer to that for me, for sure. Cartridges, the only cartridges that I really care about are the Everdrive, and that's only if I need to have them for whatever the solution I decide. I'm not like married to having to get an Everdrive.
Yeah.
So I mean, so Mister sounds like a really good option to me. That or like the Raspberry Pi thing. That's why it kind of piqued my interest.
You know, with the Mister, like I said, you need the RAM, but you really don't, depending on what core you want to play.
I would want the RAM.
Yeah, I say you need the RAM, but you don't really need the RAM depending on what you want to play.
Yeah, but even if you want to do like a PS1 game, you'll need it, right?
And actually, they are the developers actually working on. I can't remember exactly what it is that dual RAM sticks gives you. But it will work with only one RAM stick. But there's some kind of enhancement that it'll do if you have two. I don't know. That is freaking crazy. But like the thing about it is the RAM stick is this thing, and it's plugged into the board on this side, and then on this side this analog output board is plugged in over here. So
like sandwiches together.
Yeah. So basically, if you're going to do that and you already have this older analog board attachment, you're going to have to remove that, get the second RAM stick, plug it in, and then I've seen they're working on a different analog board that will allow you to, I don't know where the heck it plugs in, but it'll allow you to use two RAM sticks with it. So this one is not designed for that, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not going to be. I would be very curious what the second one actually enables, because like that's a device that I'm playing, you know, NES, SNES, Genesis, N64, PS1 games on, maybe PS1, probably PS1, because I don't want to have to go and buy some games that I want to play.
Yeah.
You know, I would buy them if they were reasonable prices, but they're not reasonable prices because it's collectors buying it, not people just trying to play the game.
Right, exactly.
If they're an alternative way to buy it, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah, man. I hate being a collector and a gamer both, because it's like I really want to play these freaking games, like, but I can't. it's this really weird mentality where like I want that game, like I want that physical game, and I want to play that physical game, but at the same time I don't want to spend $1,000 for that game, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's like this, it just, my brain is constantly doing this. I have to just like, bro, you do not need to spend $1,000 on that video game. That's just ridiculous.
Right. Oh, other two things would be a Saturn and a Dreamcast. That's what I'd want to use the Mister for. I don't know how good those things are.
So I don't think a Dreamcast is going to happen on this board.
Oh, okay.
They have talked about at some point in the future, when a better option comes out to port everything over. Because this is actually, there was another project called the Mist project that this came from that used a different board. And this is an evolution of that. So I think I saw somebody say that the N64 is about as much as this board could possibly handle.
So the N64 being more advanced than the PS1?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So
I feel that differently from the games I've played. Right?
I agree with that. Yeah. So apparently the second RAM stick has something to do with audio.
Oh, don't tell me that crap, dude. Like audio stuff is like
okay. So it says that the audio may have a very, very slight delay that will not be noticeable by a human.
Oh, and so the extra RAM
is
means
to make it 1000% accurate, basically. So that's
to reduce that 10 millisecond delay.
Right. And so that
it's basically they're having to buffer it, is what they're saying, and then you don't have to buffer if you have more RAM.
Yeah. So I don't know. Who knows? The thing is still like it's in beta right now. So who knows what could happen with this whole thing? There is a Saturn core in development, but that's not done yet. It's nowhere near as far along as the PlayStation one is. I think the PlayStation one it's been kind of the center of the show for a few months now.
Yeah.
But speaking of the Saturn, we didn't actually talk about this. So for Contra, what am I talking about? For cartridge-based consoles, you got the Everdrives. But for disc-based consoles, there is another device that does something similar to that. So it's called an optical disc emulator. And what it is like a little board that first of all, you pull the optical drive. You forcibly rip the optical drive out of your console, literally as violently as you possibly can.
Must be violent. Must be very violent.
Exactly. If flames and smoke is not involved, then you're doing it wrong. But so you remove that, and then you put this little board in there, and it has usually they have like an SD card reader. Some of them have like a little spot where you can plug a little hard drive in, or like a USB stick or whatever. And it interfaces with the console just like pretty similar to like how the Everdrive does, where you plug it in there, you turn the system on, and then it gives you a menu, and you pick different ROMs or whatever. In this case, disk images that you want to play. You load it up, you play the game, and your console is silent except for the cooling fan. So that's pretty cool. And in the case of the Dreamcast, which when that thing is freaking loading disk, it freaking sounds like that factor, like at the end of the first Terminator when he's like, his endoskeletons hang out or all that stuff. And like you can hear every movement. Like that's exactly what the Dreamcast sounds like when it's freaking loading a disc. It's insane. But anyway, so there are a couple different ones for the Saturn, a couple different ones for the Dreamcast. And actually the one that you can use on the Saturn, you can use it on the Saturn, the Dreamcast, and the PlayStation 1. So that's pretty cool. But I cannot get my head around wanting to move this board between those three consoles. That sounds horrible to me.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What are options for the Saturn that aren't that? Are there any? Is there even an emulator for Saturn?
that are not using hardware.
It doesn't matter. They aren't using the original hardware. So like the optical disc emulator is an option, right? So you don't have to go and buy all these really expensive Saturn games.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
that. There is another one. It's called the Satiator, I believe is what that's called. And it actually plugs into, there's an expansion port on the back of the Saturn, like where it has like the little watch battery in the back for the memory. So you open up that port and you plug this in there. It was something for like video discs, some kind of like expansion for video discs. I can't remember exactly what it's for, but somebody actually developed like some workaround for the system to be able to inject disk images through that port.
Oh wow!
So it's just this little box. It looks like a little cartridge thing, and you just plug it in the back, and you put disk images on it. And so that actually is the least destructive way, because we've already established that you have to literally light this thing on fire to pull the disk drive out.
Yeah.
So that when you have that thing in there, you can actually still play discs in the thing or load the images off that. So
that's awesome.
So that's pretty cool.
Is there a way to do it without the original hardware?
So there's that Mr. Core that's in development. I have no idea what the story is with that. There is, I believe, like the PC emulation on it. It is actually pretty good now.
Okay.
I know that it wasn't for a long time.
Yeah.
But I believe that it's pretty good now. I haven't actually messed with it, so
interesting.
Cannot confirm.
I need to look at it. Yeah, I think, man, I don't know. Every time we talk about this, I go in circles. You know how that is. Yeah.
It's this thing where you just get paralysis from all the different options. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. For me, like I've had a lot of this hardware for a long time, and I had most things hooked up with S-video cables for many years, and my S-video switcher died. This was like 5 or 6 years ago, and I was like, okay, I need to get another S-video switch, and I just freaking couldn't find one. Like I literally could not find one.
Wow.
Like on Amazon or something like that, versus buying some used thing. And I started doing some research on it, and it's like, yeah, you really want like a switcher. Like the ones that I had were passive, like they were not like powered switchers. Like you want in analog video audio world, you really want a powered switcher, so you're not, all that stuff. So anyway, so I started doing some research on it, and then people were like, well, there's this RGB thing that you can get into. And I was like, holy crap, that's a lot of money. And then, and then I realized, well, I'm probably not going to be happy unless I just go ahead and do it. And to be honest, it's going to be a really, really slow process anyway. So I guess I'm just doing this. So it was multiple years of collecting cables and different individual pieces and whatever. So it wasn't like I went out one day and bought all this stuff. Like that would have been insane, but it was a very, very slow process. You
have way more fortitude around all that than I do.
Yeah. I just literally came to the conclusion I'm literally not going to be happy with whatever I do unless I do this. So yeah. And pretty pleased with it.
It's an impressive setup and rig that you have. There's no doubt about that.
Well, thank you, Zerain. And I love all this gaming hardware, and so I have random things like this also hooked up. So
yeah. Well, I don't think I have anything else to talk about emulation at the moment. I mean, I'm sure I could sit and talk and ask questions for eons, but that's a different story. I think that everything would be kind of looping back around, and everything like, okay, we get it.
Right.
You're shopping.
Yeah, we'll return to the whole ROM hack, randomizer, all that stuff very soon. Wink,
indeed.
Wink, hint, hint. So Zerain. So let's just say somebody was like, heck, Zerain is really cool, and I want to know what the heck he's doing out there in cyberspace land. What is that cyberspace hacker to do with their pointing fingers?
The first thing that they're going to do is go to google.com and put in a search that says, what am I doing with my life? And then hit return. I'm feeling lucky, actually.
And then it's just, really and then whenever you do that, it's just a picture of you like coming down a slip and slide out the screen, like,
but you can actually get, well, you could do that if you want to. I don't know. I'm going to do that afterwards to actually see what happens. But you can go to Xeraen.net, Xeraen.net, and that will take you to a list of links of all the things that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Yeah, go there.
Very, very cool. And likewise, if you go to michaelk.net/links, there's a list of all the things that I do, and Xeraen is also very involved in. And if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, this is also on the YouTubles if you're interested in watching our faces while we discuss these things. So you can go to hyperpixelpodcast.net, and it has all that stuff there neatly presented for you in front of your face.
Indeed.
Well, Xeraen, it's been excellent. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. Cyberspace, thank you so much for joining us. It has been phenomenal, and we will see you next time out there in cyberspace land.